The enemy soldier who shot Jorgensen cannot be found. He may have survived or dragged himself off to die. Most of the time, you never really know. The problem now is to get Hero out of here. So Blue calls in the medevac helicopter and sets up a perimeter to protect it. Hero has stopped making brave jokes now. The shock has worn off and the pain has begun. The helicopter hovers over the jungle, and in the midst of the firefight, his buddies put Hero on the rescue chopper, and he's pulled up 100 feet. 100 feet to a hospital bed and a one-way ticket out of the Vietnam War. And then it's quiet again. Alpha Troop 19, less one man, gingerly making its way back through the heat and the smell of gunpowder, back to the pickup zone. Tomorrow, the military communique will read, one American was wounded in an engagement with an unknown size enemy force. Enemy casualties are unknown. But you've seen how it really was. Heroism, danger, fear, all rolled into one. Words don't describe it.
The Vietnam War, and pretty much every war since World War II, has been described as a limited war. What this means is that the United States held back a little bit. They didn't use everything in their arsenal. It's a little bit misleading, though, the term limited war, because it gives it the sense that maybe it wasn't as bad as other wars. That is not the case, though, as we'll see in this video. So I suppose the best place to start would be with Operation Rolling Thunder. So in early 1965, the enemy forces attacked 2 U.S. Army installations in South Vietnam. As a result, Johnson orders sustained bombing missions over North Vietnam. During Operation Rolling Thunder, 643,000 tons of bombs were dropped on North Vietnam. And throughout the entire war, more bombs were dropped than the Allies and the Axis forces in World War II used against each other combined. We also started using napalm, which is sort of like a gasoline that's refined into a jelly-type substance and dropped on forests and people and buildings, and it burned everything down, and it stuck to things. And because of that, it was very destructive and, quite frankly, a brutal way to go if you were unlucky enough. Meanwhile, in 1968, North Vietnam and the Viet Cong launched a surprise coordinated attack against major cities in South Vietnam. These attacks, known as the Tet Offensive, were designed to force Johnson to the bargaining table. The Johnson administration had been telling Americans that we were winning the war, but images of caskets told a different story. The end of the war was not in sight, like Johnson was telling us. As the war descended into a more difficult struggle, the military got even more desperate, started using chemical weapons. I'm going to hand it over to my friend at the History Channel to explain more about that.
What do you get when you mix 2,4,5-T acid and 2,4-D acid? You get a powerful herbicide that the United States military used during the Vietnam War, and one that's been tied to serious health problems for the people exposed to it. The answer is Agent Orange. Agent Orange was just one of a series of heavy-duty chemicals the U.S. military used in Southeast Asia, called rainbow herbicides. There were also Agents Blue, Pink, Green, Purple, and White, but Orange was the big one. Some 20 million gallons were sprayed on Southeast Asian jungles, fields, and other targets over a 9-year period from 1962 to 1971. It was part of what the U.S. military called Operation Ranch Hand, aiming to defoliate the South Vietnamese countryside. The goal was to rob the Viet Cong of food sources and places to hide. This kind of scorched earth fighting, clearing the land of anything the enemy could use, is an ancient military tactic. But using chemicals to do that was a pretty recent invention. England and the US developed tactical herbicides during World War II, but didn't really use them. Herbicidal warfare was first used by the British in the 1950s in what's now Malaysia. The US saw that and said, that could work for us in Vietnam. Thus, Operation Ranch Hand. But it would come with a price. In addition to those two chemicals I mentioned earlier, Agent Orange also contains something else, called TCDD, the most toxic of a class of chemicals called dioxins. Dioxins are dangerous, even in minute amounts. Veterans returning from Vietnam started reporting these health problems in increasing numbers: cancer, birth defects, miscarriages, and skin diseases, among other issues. Over 2.5 million US soldiers were exposed to Agent Orange during the war. And let's not forget about the Vietnamese. Researchers in Vietnam claim that some 2 million cancers and other diseases, and 500,000 birth defects, were caused in that country by exposure to Agent Orange. And despite some bilateral cleanup efforts, the chemicals continue to pollute the soil there to this day. The fighting in Vietnam may be long over, but its legacy haunts both sides of the conflict, thanks in part to Agent Orange.
Unfortunately, our use of chemical weapons is not the only cruel stain left by this war. It's time we talk about the My Lai massacre. This is when the U.S. slaughtered over 400 unarmed civilians in the village of My Lai in March of 1968. This happened not long after the Tet Offensive, and when Charlie Company, who lost about 28 men in that offensive, were advised that everyone in that area could be considered VC, Viet Cong. Well, they came across the village of My Lai and they found mostly women and children and some old men. They found a couple of weapons, but that was enough for Lieutenant William Calley, who gave the order to kill the villagers and destroy the village. Now, I won't go into all of the gory details because I'm not here to make you guys feel sick, but just know that what happened here was on par with some of the worst stuff that you've heard from history. It was truly horrific. And the army tried to cover this up. They knew that it would cause massive backlash, and when it did eventually get out, it caused massive backlash. This was a fully fledged war crime, and people were understandably outraged by this. And in the wake of war crimes like this, North Vietnamese forces became even more hardened and determined to not let America win this war. And to do that, the North Vietnamese forces resorted to some admittedly very clever tactics. These tunnels, known as the Cu Chi tunnels, were actually started in the 40s, way back when France was operating in Vietnam. And understandably, these tunnels were really effective. They helped them stay safe from bombing raids, they helped transport supplies, and they launched surprise attacks from the tunnels. Now, the use of these tunnels falls under the more general term of guerrilla warfare. And that's where a small irregular force will use sabotage, ambushes, raids, petty warfare, hit-and-run tactics, things like that to fight a larger, less mobile traditional military force. And this is super, super effective. And it's not even unique to Vietnam. Lots of forces use this. In fact, America used guerrilla warfare to fight and win the Revolutionary War. This tactic can bring empires to their knees. And that's exactly what happened in the Vietnam War. The successful use of guerrilla warfare was wearing down the American military. And that led to a declining support at the home front, and those factors all combined are very large parts of why we lost this war. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you're watching this on Tuesday, March 9th, you'll know that we're talking about the foreign policy aspects of the war. And on Thursday, the 11th, we're going to be talking about the home front, specifically a lot of pop culture and protest, counterculture, that kind of stuff. And it should be a pretty cool lesson. So, yeah, that's it. Bye, guys.